Welcome back to Scaling Up Not Giving Up, the podcast for founders doing business on their own terms. I'm Richard Lee. Today I'm joined by Roger Martin, CEO and co-founder of RockBox Fitness and beem, Light Sauna, and host of the Thrive More podcast. Roger spent over 30 years scaling businesses, leading national sales teams and building high-performance franchise brands from the ground up. In this conversation, we talk about what separates successful founders from the rest, the mindset shifts, the hiring truths, and the uncomfortable realities of growth. Roger doesn't pull any punches, and if you're leading a business right now, you'll walk away from this one sharper, clearer, and more focused than when you started. So let's go. So today I'm joined by Roger Martin. Roger, you've got quite a interesting past, from pharma executive to fitness franchise founder, both completely different hemispheres, I guess, but one very corporate, one not so corporate. I guess for the listeners, can you just give us a bit of a background on how things started, how you ended up in pharma, and how you ended up where you are now?
Yeah. So out of undergrad, I ended up working for Eli Lilly, which is a big pharmaceutical company, a multinational, in sales and marketing, and really built my career over 25 years with four or five different companies in those 25 years. Moved house 8 times with my family as different promotions and opportunities came available. At one point, I had a span of control of over 500 people, and then I worked my way up to a chief operating officer. And I've worked for publicly traded companies, companies that had just IPO'd, and then also private equity and privately held companies. So I'd done all that in that 25 years, had a couple successful exits, and just realized I didn't want to sell, or I wasn't really doing it, but I had armies of sales reps and managers and directors underneath me. I didn't want to be, have my legacy be, he sold pills and they treated people, but they never cured them, right? They never cured them. And that's really one of the, and I do not want to knock big pharma, because there are a lot of life-saving, necessary pharmaceutical drugs that are very important. And sometimes that is forgotten when the press jumps on them or whatever. So there's a need for it, but there's also a lot of overprescribing and unnecessary medications being prescribed when health, nutrition, moving your body, and fitness can address and solve so many of those. And I've always been passionate about health and fitness. I've been passionate about mixed martial arts and combat sports. And believe it or not, in my youth, I was a lead guitarist in like bar bands and would play in my teens and 20s. And even in my 20s, I had a professional job. I'd play in a bar band till 1 o'clock in the morning and then go to work the next morning at 8 a.m., and just live that life. So when I decided to leave corporate America, and if you have listeners that are thinking about leaving their job to start a business, or they're just getting started, it is a scary thing. I will not ever mislead somebody and say, oh yeah, it's great. You freedom and money, and it's what, no, it's scary as hell. And I'm the guy who, had a multi 6-figure salary and benefits and stock options and everything you can imagine. I'd get off a plane, there'd be somebody waiting for me with my, with a plaque with my name on it. I left all of that, basically on a Friday, and woke up on a Monday with no salary, no health insurance, no perks, nothing. And it was eye-opening, but I was ready for that change because I was 46 and I realized, I don't want to wake up 10 years from now and think, man, I just lost the last 10 years when I really should have pursued that dream that I had. And the dream was I love health and fitness. I love, as I said, combat sports. So I partnered with a guy who I had met fortuitously, who had already had built 2 small boxing for fitness studios. So nobody gets punched. There's no sparring. It's not like an MMA gym. It's boxing for fitness. So you're hitting Muay Thai bags, you're hitting teardrop bags, and then you're doing functional strength training behind that. And the brand's called RockBox Fitness. We renamed what his company was. We renamed it to RockBox Fitness, hired marketing team and marketing consultants, and really built out this brand to become a national franchise here in the United States. A lot of companies will start, they're successful, and they're really successful. And then they say, hey, let's think about franchising this so that we can get this out to more communities. And, the franchisor will make a royalty on it and blah, blah, blah. We built this from the ground up to be a national franchise, meaning a very slick brand, standardized product offering, standardized sales approach, standardized customer acquisition process. And so it's a very successful brand. We now have between 40 and 50 locations across the states. And what's cool is we've really solved for the biggest problem in fitness, and that's boredom. We'll just get bored of 3 sets of 10 and then they give up on their routine. And so this is more like a rock and roll concert on the hour every hour with RockBox Fitness, where you'll see the lights change color with the music, and it's more of a dark setting, and there's no mirrors, so people aren't judging each other or judging themselves. It's just a real high energy, fun, community based group training, and it's just helped so many people, tens of thousands of people lose weight, get in better shape, have more confidence, have more energy at work, have more energy at home, and really reclaim their lives. So I went from corporate America to entrepreneur literally in a flash.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah, in a heartbeat. And I wouldn't recommend that to everybody because it's not for the weak.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
let's delve into that bit then.
Sure.
How did that feel? Because I hate if I'm going to use this term, you may or may not like it, but I guess were you a little bit institutionalized at the time? You've been in the same institution, the same sector for a very long time. How did it feel, A, making that move, the risk, the no health insurance, and B, did it ignite you? Did it scare you? Did it do both? Did it do all of them at the same time?
All of that and more. All of that and more. You're throwing away a great career. And certainly my colleagues in the industry thought, it was a little wacky. And, and I got it from both sides. But you have to listen to the people who are supporting you, because if you're going to do this, you don't need that negative thinking, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then I say by Wednesday, I really never look back. And that's mainly true. I mean, this every day there's a moment where I'm like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? This is nuts. But you also, the more you do this, the more you realize, okay, so the question I need to ask is how, not why did this happen and what happened and why does this, why won't they do that? How can I solve this problem? How can my team solve? How can I empower my team? How can I resource my team to solve this problem? As an entrepreneur, you start asking the question how a lot more than you're asking why, what, and who, and all that. You'll find that stuff out later. It's important to do root cause analysis, but it's how. It's how. And we've got a saying in my company. I didn't come up with this, but we say it all the time: is it may not be my fault, but it's my responsibility. And when you have that attitude as an entrepreneur, certainly as a leader, even if you're in corporate America, it may not be my fault, but it's my responsibility, full stop. Then you start to become a person of accountability and a person that is going to naturally lead people in the right direction, because you're taking full responsibility and accountability. Versus what I found in corporate America a lot of times is a lot of blame, a lot of he said, she said, and a lot of blame.
Do you think, though, that there's a different view of that? I don't disagree with you, by the way. I take probably too much responsibility for too many different things. But do you think there's a counter to that, where if you're constantly taking responsibility, it leads others to not take responsibility for their own actions and not own something? And therefore you could become quicker towards burnout because everything's your problem, when actually, is it all your problem?
Yeah.
Just as a counterpoint to that.
No. And I'm glad you brought that up, because there's really an important distinction. May not be my fault. Whose fault is it? We'll figure that out. And then we'll either have performance management, or, could have been an honest mistake, could have been whatever. It could have been miscommunication from the leadership, but we'll figure that out later. But I am ultimately responsible. I am the business owner, so I am ultimately responsible. Now, who's accountable is different from who's responsible. And I know that sounds like semantics, but you cannot be accountable for everything or you'll never scale. I mean, the title of your podcast, they probably is scaling up. You cannot scale up, scaling up without giving up. You cannot scale up if you don't delegate accountability. But responsibility, too often, and gosh, I'm sure you guys follow American politics, and it's just, I think it's politics all over the world, but it's their fault, right? Everybody's pointing to the other person. It's
Yeah.
It's that side. It's that side. Nobody wants to take accountability. And what you need to do is assign accountability. Joe, Jane, whatever, you are accountable for seeing this through, for correcting this issue, for whatever's gone wrong. You are accountable to making this right. But in the day, if it doesn't get fixed, I'm responsible because I'm the business owner. And
I think it's important with accountability not to do that thing that you said with laying blame as well. You can be accountable even if it is still your fault, without the blame fallen on the person and the person feeling really bad about it.
Of
You know,
course,
they're probably killing themselves about it anyway.
of
But it's
course.
just important that you don't have that kind of blame culture, because actually there's something to learn from everything. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we had just real quick. I have a VP that worked for me that started doing work for a client before the client paid, which is the right sentiment. But then, of course, the client didn't pay, and she's like, "I feel so bad. I know, and I knew that." And I said, "You know what? This was a cheap. This is 1 month of service fees. What a cheap lesson to learn the fact that we should always be paid before we start work."
And did they
So
not get paid at all, or did they just get paid after a long time?
they didn't pay. They just didn't pay.
Okay,
And of course,
just not.
we seized service after 30 days because
Yeah,
we
yeah,
realized we weren't going to get paid. But and that happens. That's business. But it's so just to your point, she was beating the hell out of herself, and I just said, what a great gift to be given this lesson for just 1 month of service fees. Now you'll never make that mistake again. Versus we had done this with 50 customers and 40 of them ghosted us or something. And I said, look at it as a really cheap, inexpensive education. And I know I never have to. I've never had to say another word. Never had to say another word. We get paid before we work now, which is the right thing for the client, right thing for us. But you're right. Had I gone in like I told you never to start work till we, our SOP, that would have made it worse. Versus, hey, there's a lesson in here. If you invest in your employees, means you're also going to have to invest in some of their mistakes and then help them through that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important. You know, having employees and scaling, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be problems. There's going to be tons of them. And it's just about making sure that each time you learn and you move further forward, and ideally you learn as much as you can to move as far forward as you can. I think that's really the most important lesson, which is, really take that time to understand what went wrong, to put in place mitigations to make sure that can't happen again, and hopefully improves the experience for other customers, etc. along the way. Otherwise, you're just going to end up in chaos. But it's much easier for us to sit here and say that when we're not doing it directly right today. Certainly I scaled a business and it went from, good level of scale to crazy pretty much overnight. Stuff was going to go wrong. And I think, our clients, we were working with them over a period of months. So actually, even though we'd fixed one of these problems, we'd learned from it. It took a while before it stopped happening again, because there was already the train was already moving on different clients. So what we'd fixed, by the time we got the feedback of one client, it was like, yeah, we've already fixed that.
Sure.
But, that happened 6 weeks ago and we're getting the feedback now off them. So it is really important, but it's difficult at the same time. Should we just go back to the start then? How did you fund the startup? And did you have a safety net in place?
Yes.
Like you obviously left full-time work, benefits. Did you have a massive nest egg there?
So I had massive is always relative, right? But
Yeah, absolutely.
but I had ample capital. I had ample capital, and I would say that, but I bootstrapped it. I didn't take a loan. Right? And I had a business partner. He put in the expertise. I put in all the money, but great hard worker. The guy's awesome and a serial entrepreneur. But yeah, I've always lived well beneath. I still do live well beneath my means. One, I just feel much more comfortable with a bunch of zeros in the bank versus, I got a car payment and a house payment and all these other payments, because then you feel trapped. So I worked hard the first 25 years of my life and that's even after a divorce. I'm remarried now, but going through divorce, which in America you lose half your stuff, and had rebuilt after that. And just always live beneath my means. And I would just, it's so easy to tell your listeners that, but so much of our society is living beyond their means or right at their means. And it's just a dangerous place to be, especially if you want to fund something that you're dreaming about doing. So you have to have the discipline and that delayed gratification, which is such a key part of entrepreneurship and success in business. Yes. Simple answer to your question is I had an ample reserve of capital to do this, to self-fund, to where I wouldn't be sweating it. But that doesn't mean I didn't stress, because again, I went from income coming in every single 2 weeks,
The money just flooding out.
the money just flooding out. Like, it's not just you go from making money to zero, you go from making money to negative, because you're spending, and that you just have to be mentally prepared for that.
Yeah, Absolutely. On that note of the self-gratification piece and the living beyond the means, what's your thought on raising capital, venture capital, etc.? Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think it's only for the certain types of businesses? What's your thought?
Yeah. Great question. Well, I have real strong opinions on this. If you can self-fund, I would, and it not impact your lifestyle if things don't go the way they should, radically impact your lifestyle. I think you should self-fund because you want to have 100% control. If you really believe in your concept, why would you want to give away 20 or 30 or 50 or 80% of your business? Like, why?
Yeah, agreed.
But if you have a really expensive build, I'm thinking, a really expensive tech build or a
There's
manufacturing.
100% reasons to raise. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's totally
ex-
impossible. But I
exactly.
think sometimes what I see is entrepreneurs wanting to raise rather than just get their head down and work and self-generate sometimes. Because, certainly with big tech products, you do need to raise. But sometimes you don't, and often you don't need the finished product. You just need part of the product that solves part of the problem you're solving, at which point then you're generating some cash. If the grand plan is you want to be charging £1,000 a month and you're currently generating £200 a month per customer, it's still £200. It's got you going further forwards. And I think, you learn a lot from those initial customers as well. So my opinion is if you can start cash generating quickly, even if you're not in profit and therefore you still need to raise. But I think sometimes people see raising as, okay, well, we've got a year before we're even going to do anything here. And I'm like, that's just a crazy way to go.
Yeah.
For me, it's very high risk.
Well, and VCs have gotten smarter. A private equity firm is not going to invest if it doesn't have cash flow, but unless it's an amazing, one of a kind thing. But VC, angel, friends and family, well, even a lot of friends and family are getting smarter at, okay, do you have an idea or a business? And a quick little story is I had a CEO I used to report to. This is 20 years ago, and I said, hey, we're just having lunch, and I said, yeah, I have a friend, another on the West Coast. Starting a business and really excited to be in business now. This person on their own. And he said, I will never forget this. He just, between bites of soup or something, he goes, does she have any customers? I said, well, not yet. He goes, then she doesn't have a business. She has an idea. And he just kept eating his soup. And I was like, wow, what there is wisdom. Here's this.
So true though, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, so true.
Yeah.
You could not say a truer word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
I think
get some customers, then go raise some money. If you need to raise money, first go get some customers.
you are in
proof of concept.
such a better position if you've raised money. If you've got customers before you raise money, you're going to get a much, much better return on your raise, 100% better.
Yeah. I'll give you one other thing that, like to me, partnerships are powerful. Even VCs can bring in expertise and connections and things that an entrepreneur may not have. Like there is power in that. But I would tell you that getting into business as an operating partner with another person, that is complex. So even if you both put in money or somebody brings in kind and somebody else puts in the money, and I've operated with several different partners in different businesses, that's difficult. When you have an investor who is giving guidance at board meetings, maybe, monthly updates, whatever it may be, making connections for you, and they have a vested financial interest in the business, there's a lot of value in that. And it's definitely more simplified. If you've commingled investments with 2 or 3 people that are all operating within the business, you've got yourself a second marriage or a 3-way marriage, at some point, because it's just so much more complicated. And so I would say the only reason you should ever get into a partnership is if that person brings a unique, very, very, very different set of skills to the party than you have. And what usually happens, right, is 2 sales guys have a great idea or 2 engineers have a great idea. And now, do you really need both? You really don't. Now you've split the money, the profit, and created problems.
I think it's a really interesting concept. I personally was a solo founder and I found it quite lonely at the top. And I think having a co-founder would have helped, even if they had similar skills to me, because sometimes it's just about being able to discuss the ideas with someone that equally has the same level of risk and skin in the game. But I think you're right that ultimate would be you want to have complementary skills rather than different. And I'm not saying everyone should have a co-founder, but I think sometimes it can be useful. And, certainly I haven't had a co-founder, but I do look back and think, yes, I could see that that would have been useful. Like, how does that work with you and your business partner then? Co-founders, are you 50-50? Are you,
So
and how do you split the workload?
Yep, we started at 50-50, and then we brought in a third partner who had a lot of expertise in franchising for the different franchise brands that we built. And so that changed the cap table. But I have since sold one of the brands. And so we just have shares in that new company, much smaller amount of shares in that new company. And then RockBox Fitness, I ended up buying out my two partners at the beginning of 2024 just to simplify things, to get control, and to kind of take the business where I wanted to take it. So I don't know if there's a wrong or right answer, man. Richard, if I had the answer, I'd be doing, probably
And I
doing.
think that probably
Yeah,
is the answer, isn't it?
yeah,
Which is, do you know what? The circumstance and the people and the specific business gives you what the answer is. So
yeah,
it's not, there isn't just one answer. There's a lot of variables there, but a lot of things to think about.
yeah.
Just before we move on to franchising, how do you think your corporate experience helped you or hindered you as an entrepreneur?
I think it helped me 1,000 ways, and maybe only hindered me in, you know, one or two, if I can even think of those. I really have mad respect for somebody that just comes out of, call, or just quits college or is out of high school and starts to, primary school, and starts to, build a business. I was so fortunate that, I was with companies that heavily invested in my development, taught me high level persuasion and influence skills, taught me great leadership skills, invested in me growing as a leader, paid for my MBA when I went back to school. I was still working, but they paid for the state tuition. I can't tell you how many seminars and courses I was able to go through that they either brought to the company or I attended. And then just the experience that you get working in a large company where you've got, 1,000 or 100,000 different personalities, 100,000 different agendas. Half the people, a third of the, I always kind of, a third of the people are going to work harder than you ask them to, because that's who they are. A third are going to do just what you ask them to do, and a third don't really do a whole lot of work, and they churn out, and hopefully you can performance manage them out. But to work then in those dynamics and realize not everybody's going to be like you. You're going to have to learn how to build a highly effective team, even if your colleague, one region over whatever is building a completely different and lower performing team. You've got to focus on your team and your corporate division, and you learn to focus on what matters. So I would say that I am incredibly grateful for what I learned in, public speaking skills, all that, writing skills. I'm incredibly grateful for what I learned in corporate America and was able to hone. So they're not just going to teach you all of it. Like you've got to be willing to learn, willing to put in the extra work, willing to go the extra mile to get that kind of investment in your development. And I was. And then I just found that those directly correlated over to running and scaling a business, because I had that professional polish, if you will. I had that ability to, when we had a brand new concept in franchising, you had to go in and sell it to these REITs, these large landlords that own, ginormous amounts of property, and you're trying to get a retail commercial space of 3,000 square feet. And they're wondering, well, one, can you pay rent? Two, what kind of business? How is this even going to be successful? And if we invest in tenant improvements and pay the broker fees and all this and give you a few months free rent, are we going to recoup that investment? So, I had the wherewithal to put on my suit that I used to wear from, because now I wear t-shirts and jeans because I'm an entrepreneur. But back then, in pharma, I had Brooks Brothers suits and ties. And so I did what I knew how to do. I put together a presentation deck on the brand. We didn't even haven't built one, so it was like a mock-up of the studio, of the accessories we were going to sell with the gloves and all that for RockBox, and wraps that had RockBox branding on it. Talked about the market, talked about the avatar and how they have the average avatars of a woman around 35, and how she has discretionary income that will spend in other retail locations to help make sure those retail, and like went in and gave a pitch like I was used to doing in pharma for business to business when I started
And
to sell.
that skill
Yeah,
does sound totally transferable. What
100%.
about the fact that you didn't have a leader or a manager above you anymore?
Ooh, okay, that's a great question.
Because that's completely different.
Yeah. If
And
you are,
suddenly you don't have this big machine that's there to help you make a decision and to guide you on which way to go.
yep,
Even if you're really senior in an organization, they still have that in big corporates.
100%, 100%. And I would tell you too, I still have a boss. I have a bunch of them. They're all franchisees, right? I consider them
Uh-huh.
my boss. My team, I consider my boss. And I'm not playing with words here. I really look, my job's to serve them. My job is really to serve them. Thank God I don't have a bank. I do have some personal guarantees though on things for leases and I did take on some debt when I bought out my partners, self-financed debt by some of the partners. So I definitely still feel like I report, if you will, but it is, if you are not, let me just lay this out, Richard, for your listeners, if you are not a top performer in your corporate role, whatever you're doing, and thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, let me save you a whole lot of money, heartache, and time and tell you it's probably not for you. And that's okay. And that's okay. And again, if you need to be told what to do at work, if you only do what's asked of you at work, that is a habit. That is a habit that you've ingrained. And that behavior and past behavior is the best predictor of future performance. I can share with you that after managing thousands of people, doing, I don't know, tens of thousands of interviews over my 30 some year career, and owning a dozen different businesses, you have to be the person that gets up in the morning and not only motivates yourself, but motivates your team and everyone down line and your customers and all that. Because there, as Richard's saying, there will be nobody that will say, "Hey, it's 8 o'clock. Where are you?" That doesn't happen, and so it has to be you. And I guess what I've seen is I've seen this with franchisees, I've seen this with other just business owners opening up independent businesses. Is they search for freedom because they hate what they're doing in corporate America, and they think, well, if I can
But
do
then
this
they
for
hate
myself,
freedom.
then exactly, because they get lost in that freedom. They get lost and they start spinning around the axle on stuff that doesn't matter and become a victim. When there's way too many victims in our, not to get political, but there's just way too many victims and victim mentality in our world today. I don't care what country you're in. And in corporate America, you can always say they, right? They. Well, they suck. They didn't do this. Well, they don't provide us with this, or they picked a stupid strategy. Or, there's no they. You are they when you're an entrepreneur. And that gravity of responsibility weighs on some people much, much heavier than they ever expect. I've embraced it. I love it. I'm not going to mislead any of your leaders. I sat in a chair last night talking to my wife for an hour, just like questioning life, like literally questioning life, like, because I've taken on a lot, probably too much. And then I'm at, I have franchisees, which means I have employees that I really can't fire, if that makes sense. I really don't have them. They're my employees. They own their own business. It's all independent, but I'm trying to drive results through somebody that I really cannot performance manage at a high level like you can an employee. And you certainly can't fire them. So, once you get into business with them, you're in business with them. And it can be really hard at times. So you just have to know. But I knew sitting there, just saying, woe is me, but also saying, I think I said, made a comment like, God only gives us what he knows we can handle. And then just a little bit more. I said, but honestly, he didn't give this to me. I gave this to me. Like, I have to own the fact it's my responsibility, right? Right. The stuff that's going wrong, maybe not my fault, but it's my responsibility. I chose to become an entrepreneur. I chose to open several businesses. I chose to scale. I made those choices.
And it's also okay to have days where you're thinking, this is too much.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
no one is up all the time. I don't care what
Yeah.
anybody says.
Yeah.
Because, running a business is hard. And even in corporate life, you have good days and you have bad days.
Sure.
And it's the same.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same. So, you'll have had similar chats with your wife in your 37-year career in corporate life.
For sure.
What's the point? How do you feel? What do you think is the difference between the personal risk, playing with your money or playing with someone else's money? Because they both have risk, right?
They do.
Because you could lose your job in corporate America, etc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's still different, isn't it?
I think it's 100% different because, and here's the difference. And if you're a solopreneur and you work out of your house and you have real low overhead, that's one thing. I have rented an 11,000 square foot office space that I've got a personal guarantee on that ain't cheap. That hitting that rent every month is not inexpensive. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't rent as much space, but we had different plans back then. We were going to grow different brands. We ended up selling one of those brands. I have, personal guarantees on 7 figures of debt that the business is helping to pay down. That it's scary. And so I can't just say, you know what, this job sucks, I'm going to go get another job, and I leave kind of even Steven. If I were to say that, well, I'd have, $2 million worth of personal guarantees that I'd have to pay, in addition to winding down the business, which has all kinds of costs involved in it and stuff. So it's not, when you're an entrepreneur, if you've scaled to any level, and unless you're just, you've got a really unique situation. If you've scaled to any level, you've got manufacturing, you've got, even if it's third party manufacturing, there's costs to break up. There's, you have to know that the only way out is through. Like, there's another lesson for your listeners. If you get into this and you scale, if you get into this and you realize it's not for you, probably you're going to get out, no harm, no foul. You can go back and get another job. But if you get into this and you scale and you keep scaling up and not giving up, there's going to be a point where there's never a point of no return, but you're going to get to a point where the return is expensive, painful, arduous, and just part of the process. And you have to understand that the only way out is through. The only way out is through. You can't just be in it and say, I'm going to go out the exit door. There is no exit door. You've got to go through. And that gauntlet can be bloody at times. But then, as you know, when you get to that gauntlet, you look back and you go, okay, I am beat up. I'm scarred. I have some scar tissue. I learned a ton. I learned more in that situation than I learned in my entire MBA, So there's lessons in that too. The old fighting saying, we win or we learn. You're gonna learn a lot because you're not always gonna win. And that's okay, because that learning becomes, a springboard to your next win.
And we talked a bit about bootstrapping earlier, but what about the difference between spending cash and not spending cash? Because I think, everyone when they're starting a business should be bootstrapping, but how do you know when to, take the shackles off the bank account a little bit? I'm not taking them off the same completely, but at what point can you start turning the tap on to spend a little bit? Because I think in corporate life, it's a bit easier when it's not your money, per se, to feel like you can spend.
Yeah. So we had to pay, and this isn't like a huge amount of money, but we had to pay this bill that really wasn't our issue, but we had to just to make this change that we're implementing happen. And it's $23,000. And we're like, well, we got to pay it. And I just looked at my VP and I said, just know as we do this, like, it's not just 23,000. That's 23,000 that's really coming out of my checking account. Because at the end of the day, if I own 100% of this business, even though I have my business accounts that, for working capital, at the end of the day, the profits funnel to my personal checking account. And so I just wrote a check out of my personal checking account for 23,000 for something that could have been avoided. That's half a car, like that's or the nicest, one of the nicest luxury vacations you could take. And I just wrote a check for it. So,
isn't it? Yeah, I agree. Devastating.
But at that same point, I don't spend money in business the way I spend it personally. So I say I live well beneath my means personally. I will definitely, like, I'll fret over a car purchase or something. I'll just research and make sure I got, get a good deal. With business, speed wins. And you have to move quickly if you want to be at the top of the food chain. So I will spend money quicker, faster, and more of it in business. And I almost look at my business spending very independently of my personal spending, but I'm not wantonly spending. Like we have a saying, let's manage to the right of the decimal point, because when you do that, you're running an efficient business. But also, well, hey, this is going to cost, $32,000, but here's what we get for it. All right, well then make the investment, or hey, this is going to be a $200,000 investment. Okay, let's run some scenarios. Let's do, sleep on it. Let's come back next week. Does everybody still feel good? All right, let's make the investment. Or wait, is there another way we can do this and only spend 120? Like, is there a way? But it may be you got to spend, 200,000. And I have always been able to do a lot with less. I feel I've been able to do a lot with less capital than a lot of people I know and associate with do. Like, they just seem to spend more when it comes to building their businesses than I will. However, again, I hate debt. I hate personal guarantees, but it's some of that's unavoidable, especially in the business model you're in, to scale and grow. And I'm not saying anything everyone has not already heard, but you're either growing or you're dying as a business. Just like a tree, you're growing, you're dying. And so if you're not funding your business, reinvesting some of your proceeds, take home some profit, but some of your proceeds, then you're probably dying. And that can only last so long. So there's not an exact answer, but you do have to look at business funding a little separately than you do personal funding, because you have to make faster decisions in business. You don't have to go buy that new car, right?
Yeah. Let's just talk about that agility in business then. Why do you think that matters so much, especially for your type of business, but in general in business?
As far
agility.
as agility,
Well,
oh my gosh.
yeah.
Because, one, we're recording this in 2025, right in the middle of the AI run, and things are changing not by the month, but by the week. And actually, one of my businesses, Thrive More Autopilot, has an AI component, some custom software we built for lead nurture to get prospects turned into customers for our clients. And that is moving so fast that I have to continually invest. I can't just build a product and go, okay, cool, let's just take it to market. We're good. We take it to market and then we start iterating immediately, spending more money to make it better, because I know the competition is going to make it better. And it's an arms race to figure out who can, win the market share with the best product that gets the job done and serves the clients in the industry. Speed matters. And too often than not, in corporate America, the reason there's a delayed response is because there's a worry. People are scared to take the responsibility or the accountability. And the longer you can delay decision, the safer you kind of feel. Well, that's fine when it's somebody else's money, but when it's your own money, if you delay too long or you overthink it, you've lost the opportunity. It's gone. If you finally take that much decision this is what if you can get 80% of the information, Richard, in my book, and it makes sense, that's a go signal. 80% go. The other 20% we may never figure out, or we're going to find out that, ooh, that's bad. We didn't realize that was the other 20%, but we're going to figure that out. But people who are waiting to get 100% of information or perfect information to make a decision, by the time you get it, the opportunity's gone. It's passed you by. Don't even bother. People love to talk about, yeah, I'm starting a business. Well, then just freaking start it. Then just go. Start it. Like, if you're really about it, start it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I do think there's an instance, and I can think of some people I've worked with, where going slower actually makes you go faster.
Sure.
Because I think sometimes people run at stuff and they run at so many things at such pace that carnage ensues and nobody in their team understands what's going on, and they just waste tons of time and effort. And certainly, obviously, my background's tech. I see that quite a bit in the tech space. People just run at stuff, and obviously developing a tech product takes time. And because they've run at it, they're changing it continually, which means that you're just creating a load of technical debt at that point. So yeah, so I think what we're both saying is that agility and speed is key. I think it's just sometimes you need to take a step back and think, is the pace I'm working actually slowing the overall game down?
For sure. And I think on your side of the pond, it's called football. On our side of the pond, it's called soccer. And if we think about a young kid's soccer team, a 4 or 5-year-old kid's soccer, they all run to the ball. They're all running around the ball, right? So right now, everybody's running around AI versus, the players that become the Messis and the Ronaldos, they don't, they don't look where they look where the ball's going, just like Gretzky, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is. And so I would say that sense of agility and urgency should always be present, but be present in the direction of where the puck or where the ball is going, the soccer ball is going, versus where everybody's at. Because what I think you've described, and I see, and I'm guilty of it too. Oh, everybody's going here. Let's go. And we go really fast, but this has already happened. It's already happened, right? So where is it going? And then put all your speed and your effort towards where it's going. And then I don't think you can go fast enough. What happens is people get shiny object syndrome and squirrel, and they get distracted. And then they drag their team back and forth. And that's what you described, where the team, you're going way slower, thinking you're going faster. And you're busy, and busy's the new stupid.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Just touching on franchising then, why did you want to start a franchise business? And how is it managing franchisees as opposed to managing staff?
There's there are benefits and there are cons to managing franchisees versus staff. So I will say that we decided to franchise because I wanted to scale. I wanted to scale, and franchising is a way to scale brick and mortar locations without huge capital, right? Huge capital investments, because it's the franchisee's money. And again, we're not making money off the construction and all the build out and all that stuff, but that is significant capital. And so it's a way to scale faster, and it's a way to get your brand across the nation faster. But you do run into, so that's a pro managing. I love helping people get into business who want to get into business, but aren't quite sure how to do it, have some more fear, need a sandbox to play in. They can learn from my, 6-figure mistakes that I've made along the way. They can learn from those things that were bad decisions, because I won't have them do that. The playbook, so to speak, the ops manual has removed all of those. So I love that. I love helping people chase their dream. The frustrating part is you don't have complete control, not that you'll ever have control in any environment, but you have less control because it's an independently owned and operated business. It's their own LLC. It's their own money. They're using our brand, our trademarks, our operating system, our support. We support them for a share of their top line revenue in a royalty. And there's that exchange of value. They share in some of their revenue. We share in ongoing and forever support, updating things as they go, new technology, always making sure we're on the leading edge, and going out to their sites and helping them on site. I'll actually be in Colorado Springs, Colorado here Sunday and Monday, helping a franchisee that is going through a tough time and went through a divorce and just needs some help and turn their studio around. So I'm going to fly out there and be there for 2 days. Even though I'm the CEO, I'm going to be there for 2 days with her staff, shoulder to shoulder. Really is a show of support that I'm in this with you. My team is in this with you. And it's not just from the home office. Well, you should do this. You know what? I'll get on a plane. I'll come out and I'll show you exactly how to do it so that we can all practice and your team can be great long after I leave. So there's the con is that not con, but just the drawback is you can't performance manage the way you can with an employee. Hey, let's be honest. All of us that are in business for ourselves, even if you're a franchisee, you and I on this podcast included, have a little bit of narcissism. We have to, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be in business for ourselves. Because what you're saying is, you know what? I think I can do this a little bit better or a lot better than anybody else has done it before, or I wouldn't be betting my savings, or I wouldn't be betting my time, or betting a career that I left. I think I can do this better, which is okay. Like, that's okay. And because business owners have to have that somewhere in their DNA and that unbridled confidence, managing other business owners is not always the easiest thing to do. And I used to laugh because I've owned 2 RockBoxes and 1 Beam Light Sauna, which we ended up selling that brand. My own money, built them outside of corporate money. It was my own money, my own investments. Built them, hired the team, trained the team, had a general manager to run the business for me while I managed it remotely. And then I'd be in that business a couple times a week. But I would probably be the worst franchisee any brand would want, because I'm always trying to iterate and do the next thing and try different new things and try and fail and try and fail and try and fail till I hit something. And then I push the gas pedal on that, which I love that, because as a franchisor, it allowed me to figure out what works and doesn't for my franchisees. But as a franchisee, that would be a nightmare, because the franchisor is like, whoa, we don't do that. We do this, and there's ego with any business owner, because he or she felt, hey, I can do this a little bit better. It's the more we can check that ego at the door and be curious, be genuinely curious, the farther we go. And that's a lifelong pursuit. If we're in a state of curiosity and gratitude, you can't be angry. You can't have fear. You can't have confusion, because you're curious. But as you said earlier, the chips are down. That's easier said than done when live ammunition is being fired at you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that. The live ammunition's being fired at you, because that's what it feels like some days. You're like, whoa, I don't want to stick my head up here, because
exactly.
There's a lot of incoming flak coming my way.
Who's got a Kevlar jacket I can borrow?
Yeah. What do you think's the biggest lessons you've learned from founding the multiple businesses?
Man, great question. It's funny. I've not been asked that, and I've been on several podcasts. The biggest lesson I have learned from founding a multitude of businesses is team. If you want to scale, the team that you hire Let me get really clear on your answer, because it's a good question. Your listeners deserve a great answer. Interviewing and interviewing at the highest level to identify talent and identify traits, not skills. If you don't know how to sell, I can teach you how to sell. If you don't know how to code, you can learn how to code. If you have, obviously you probably won't know somebody knows how to code, but maybe they don't know how to code a certain thing. They can learn that. That's a skill. If you don't have a work ethic, I can't teach that to you. If you aren't collaborative and a team player, I'm probably not going to teach that to you. I can't put in, as a leader, as an owner, as a manager, what God left out. I can't do it. And if your parents didn't instill that in you, I'm probably not going to, if you're already 30 or 35 years of age. People talk about the team's everything. And, what was it? Henry Ford said, or somebody said, all my assets go down the elevator at 5 p.m. every single night, or so. I forgot who said that, but it's true. The reason they're saying this is because it's true. When you have a great team, your business just gets easier, life gets easier, and your business grows because they will show discretionary effort. They're not part of that 1/3 that won't ever do, or they're not even part of the third that'll just do what you ask them to. It is possible to have a company of people in that top third, and then there'll be a stratification in that top third, of course. But I was very blessed to work with they got bought by Korn Ferry, the world's largest, professional recruiting firm, but it was called the Hay Group. And they taught us competency. When I was at a pharma company, they taught us competency selection interviewing. And that, it's been called many different things, behavioral interviewing, but basically you're interviewing for past behavior so that you can identify traits, because those traits will be the best predictor of future results. And so many times, Richard, people are, well, what are your strengths or what are your weaknesses? We all know those are BS questions. They're throwaway questions. Or why do you think you make a good fit here? And they have the answer that, anybody with ChatGPT is going to have a great answer for that. But if you take them through a competency selection process, and there's different methods to do that, and I encourage people to go research that and pay for a course to take it, like significant money that you could, because if you can hire well, you will make money in life. You will do well. If you can't hire
absolutely.
well, you're never going to scale. If you can't hire well, and the crazy thing is I've heard so many people and other business owners complain about their team. And my question is, well, who hired them? Well, I did.
What are you doing about it?
Yeah, exactly. What do you like? So and I went through this year-long program called Stegan Academy here in the States. It's in Dallas, Texas. And the founder, CEO, ran Stegan. I love his saying. He goes, leaders have the organization they deserve. Leaders have the organization they deserve because the leaders built and created that organization. And so if they have problems in the organization, if they have dissonance, if they have, gossip, if they have, toxicity, they deserve it because they've allowed it. And what you promote, what you tolerate. You promote what you tolerate. So if you tolerate it, just know you're telling everybody in your team, yeah, that's okay to do that. It's okay to show up late to work. It's okay not to come to work. It's okay to miss your deadlines. It's okay. And if you can hire well, you will weed out those people, because a good hiring process is not meant to find great candidates. A good hiring process is designed in its essence to eliminate candidates, and then by the law of attrition, hey, I've got these 2 or these 3 left. They've passed everything. These are my 3 candidates I'm going to get really serious about. But instead, we look for reasons to hire somebody when we're interviewing. We should be looking for reasons not to hire somebody, because there's 7 billion people on this planet. There's plenty of people out there that we can find.
I also think, and it's similar to what you said, it's about hiring around values, and those should align with your company values. And obviously you listed some before, like your work ethic, etc. You need to hire around values, not just around skills, because if you're hiring around values, like you said, skills can be taught. And I'm not saying you should just hire someone that a perfect fit values wise and has absolutely no skill in what you're needing at all. It's values that are most important. And I think most businesses forget that. And most interview processes are not developed to work that out. They're the bullshit questions, like you said.
Yep.
What do you think about the new generation and how you motivate and adapt your leadership style to that? Because you must have, your leadership style now must be completely different to the leaders that you started work with.
For sure. I'm Generation X, which means you dangle the carrot, which is usually money or promotion. And then you ask, well, how high do I have to jump to get that? And then you would go through hell or high water to get that. We were a very money motivated, status motivated generation. And Gen Z, this younger generation that's in the workforce now, is still money motivated. Like, we all need to pay our bills, but they're also interested in, why are we doing this? So I was always interested in, what are we doing it? What are we doing? And how do I do it? And then what do I get? And they're more interested in why we're doing what we're doing. And so that has to be part of your leadership style of why we're doing this, why you come to work, what our mission is, what we're trying to achieve. Here's your role in that mission. And granted, we should have been managing this way for, 100,000 years. We just didn't. But I really believe there's value in that, because then you have more buy-in. But I will say, I do believe that there is a gap in this and I have two Gen Z kids. One's 24, one's 21, and love them to death, and they're both doing well. But there is a different outlook on life and business and where work plays the role. Where in my generation, it was, you work, it doesn't matter how many hours until you get it done. And they definitely want more of a work life balance, which as an entrepreneur I kind of laugh at. But I understand that generation needs different context. They need different context than I needed. And again, my job is to manage to them, not at them. And so I need to be able to manage in words and methodology that they understand, versus what's comfortable for me or what makes sense to me. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to me. It needs to make sense to them. And so, yes, every generation, these young kids, they don't blah, blah, blah. Every generation's always going to say that. There's some truth to that with Gen Z, but Gen Z is also a wickedly smart generation that is incredibly tech savvy and embraces change. They've embraced change more so than my generation. And so that's an asset in your business, but you do have to manage them in the appropriate way. But they're there, but they're out there. And I think what people, I interviewed 50 people and they all sucked. Well, then you haven't interviewed the right 50 people. Keep looking.
Yeah, completely agree. If there's one thing you've learned along this process that you wish you knew at the start, what is that?
Oh, we don't have enough time in the day, but if
One
there's
thing, remember, not all the things.
One thing,
The most important one.
Yeah. Yep. You have to work. I kind of stole this from Alex Hormozy, who was funny because I was in the gym business, or I'm in the gym business, and I hired him as a consultant back in 2017 before anybody knew who Alex Hormozy was. So I've been a fan of his forever and learned a lot from him. But his saying is, you have to work for an unreasonable amount of time, with an unreasonable amount of effort, with an unreasonable amount of tenacity, to achieve what you set out to achieve. And so many people, and luck has some of it, like, I don't know really any billionaires that didn't have some luck in their life, like a big stroke of luck. Because why did Uber go crazy and then Lyft was not nearly as big, and there's several of them that are fallen off? Or why did Instacart take off but so many Webvan failed? There's timing that has to do with a lot of that. But take all of that stuff out, because that should all normalize across all the human beings. You have to be willing to work an unreasonable amount of time at an unreasonable effort, with unreasonable tenacity. Beyond unreasonable, meaning beyond what not even the average person, the above average person would do, to achieve what you want to achieve. But if you do, it is not unreasonable that you will achieve it. It's not guaranteed, but it's almost certain if you apply those three unreasonable categories. So I was ready to do that. And, in this now for 9 years, you have to be willing, like it almost is unreasonable. Like, I keep using that word. What is expected of an entrepreneur to be successful at any level? And the faster you can accept that, and I've fought it and looked over my shoulder. Well, why is that happening so fast for that guy? Or why is that gal just falling backwards into success? But what we don't see is what they've put in. We don't see, behind the scenes. We don't see all that. And overall, unless you just get super lucky, you have to put in work that is, in essence, unreasonable, yet it's necessary.
And I think that is really key. And I think I keep seeing this meme comes up quite a bit, which is, an entrepreneur will work reasonably, I guess, to get an outcome that most people would dream of potentially. But I think the other thing around unreasonable we just need to talk about is you just need to make sure that you're reasonable with your staff, because I think it's easy to expect the same of them that you expect of yourself. And that isn't always sustainable when you're an entrepreneur, because the way you're working can be unreasonable.
Agreed.
So I think that's really important.
And it's how you ask, right, Richard? It's how you ask, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I know it's outside of working hours. I know it's Saturday night. I wouldn't ask if this weren't really, really important. And if you can't, I understand, but it would mean the world to me if you could find your way to your computer, if you're at home, or even maybe you can find the file on your phone, but I really need this. And I'm very grateful in advance. That's really different than saying, hey, I need you to work Saturday night for this. That's just very, very different. So you can even get discretionary effort and unreasonable effort if you ask the right way and you're genuine, you really mean it, and you're authentic, and you don't do it every Saturday night. You can't do it every Saturday night. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Roger, it's been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. If listeners want to connect with you or learn more, where should they head to?
Yeah. They can follow me on social media at Real Roger Martin. So just Real and then ROGER Martin. I'm sure they'll probably be in the show notes. If they have a brick and mortar location here in the United States, actually, we can even do it remotely. So it could be overseas. Just with the time change, we would just hire a rep in a different time zone. But if they have a brick and mortar fitness, wellness, recovery, self-care business, but brick and mortar, not internet, and are looking to get more leads and get those leads through their front door, and we do all the work to get them through their front door, check out thrivemore.ai, thrivemore.ai. And it just shows on there what we do. But I really am on a mission right now, because I've worked with so many small and mid-sized businesses, to help small and mid-sized businesses get, to stack the deck in their favor and get an edge over these mega companies by being faster, by working in a more agile manner. And so we really help turn their leads into paying customers. Really excited about this new business. We've been doing it for about a year now, and just had some great success stories and case studies. And that's at thrivemore.ai.
Amazing. Roger, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners will agree. So thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
That's it for this episode of Scaling Up, Not Giving Up. A huge thanks to Roger Martin for joining me. You can find his book, An Insider's Guide to Business, his podcast, Thrive More, and more via the link in the show notes. If this episode helped you reframe something in your business, follow the show and share it with another founder in your network. And if you want more tools, insights, and behind the scenes from my journey, head to richard-lee.co.uk. I'm Richard Lee, so see you next time.